what I'll do is I will share my PowerPoint with you so as to talk you through very briefly the timetable here to ensure that things are, you know what's happening. So folks, you should be able to see a PowerPoint now with timetable on. I'm in the middle of scene setting now. We then hand over to one of my colleagues from the Walking the Land Collective, Kel Portman, to give us some background. At approximately 1:55, Rory will set the video going, and then we move into panel session. And the panel session is led by Richard Keating and Suze Adams, and for a few minutes they are going to introduce the positioning of watermarks, and then there will be an open discussion, and we'll move swiftly into, or smoothly, I hope, into closing the panel down at 3:10. So that's our timetable. I'm stopping sharing now because I'm now going to hand over to Kel Portman. Kel, I do hope you're here. I can't actually see you in the room at the moment. Kel, if you're in the room, can you make yourself known? No, indeed. Richard, I'm afraid this might, to ensure smooth running, this might have to move to your good self as substitute. But let's just bear a minute. Rory, can you see if Kel has joined at all? Joe is saying there's yeah, Carolyn is saying he was having problems with browser and film. So Richard, maybe if you're willing, would you do this brief introduction?
Okay, I will do. Thanks, Ian, and hello to everyone else. Hello, fellow watermarkers. So Walking the Land and First Friday Walks have been going on since about 2004. As the name suggests, for First Friday Walks, we meet and have met the first Friday of every month since 2004. We have also run a number of projects with people such as the Forestry Commission, Cotswold Conservation Board, trying very much to link people, local communities with their landscape and decision makers. Primarily the walks, the First Friday Walks, have been with local artists, practitioners, but we also have had ecologists, historians, archaeologists taking part too. So when the pandemic came along, we actually found that our geographical spread changed, it broadened, and we lost a lot of the people that would normally walk with us face to face. But it did mean that we managed to share our practice with a wider range of artists in the UK, and also a number of people from overseas. That was partly through the Walking Artists Network we managed to make that contact. So Kel and I sat down in the woods one day and said we'd like to do a project with these other people about place. That evolved into Walking Talking Place, which we kind of ran on 2 Zoom meetings a month, one being the First Friday Walk, from which we had scripts and numerous ways, WhatsApp groups, etc., to try and enable us to walk together apart. But we also found that we needed to introduce a new Zoom meeting, which we've called the Last Tuesday Cafes. And from that, or through that, we've developed a number of projects, one of them being Watermarks. So originally, we were going to have an exhibition in Inverness or wherever and talk face to face. Once that became apparent we wouldn't be doing that, we had to invent a new way of achieving it. So, as I say, we've done that online by walking and talking together, but also by making this assemblage And I think it's important to say that many of us, not all of us, but many of us, aren't video makers. So Andy Friedman has been very supportive in helping a number of artists to turn, in some cases, still images into video clips. And that's very much what we're going to be looking at. Yeah, I think that's it. So we're going to be looking at this assemblage of the work of 16 artists, more or less 2 minutes each. So with that, Rory, I think we're ready to show the video.
Across the board game, glued down with broken back barnacles. A 2, 3, 4 pronged attack surged into corners, crevices, cavities. Look down to examine incursions, clues of scoring and marking, flicking like a snake's tongue into the houses of the dispossessed. Consider the energy after the swell, bleeding into deltas, feeding feeders. You bridge lagoons of stillness, trailing your fingers along incisions, into hollows, chambers, and cutaways. where sand grains spun like spinning tops, where water met and bit into the land, now made known to your wider view.
Is this really just one place? Looking down, arid flakes of mud meet rock pools and scarred stones. On this transient edge between land and water, drip and trickle blend with bird calls across tranquility. The crumbling cliffs behind tell geologists their red rock histories. Strips and stripes in narrow bands fill the view across. The other bank. Quiet lulls, a couple of beats, then 6 hectic hours for the next world to evolve. I watch this landscape withdraw from center stage. My arid mud now submerged by the surge which later will rush faster than anyone can run. I see few humans, but in this busiest of habitats, the elements work flat out. Without moving, I am now on the streaming frontier, the obstacle, a site of toil and danger, the barrier between us and us. But this ancient highway, this hazardous conduit, now connects here with the rest of the world.
Watermarks. Watermarks time slow passing. Watermarks made by numberless tides and rivers flow. Celestial mark making, a sea change of marks drawn and redrawn by the moon and the sun. Marks drawn by water, intaglio marks etched, engraved and gouged in mud. Water-filled channels worked, reworked, revised and altered. Twice daily the river redraws, always reassessing marks made earlier. A shifting topography, the river's never happy, repeatedly improving. Watermarks seasons passage. Watermarks time. Watermarks time's rapid passing.
So that I think is us.
Mhm.
Thank you very much, Rory, for sharing that with us. What folks you've just been watching is, from my mind anyway, is a collective, collaborative assemblage, and it's an assemblage of responses to the call for papers as it went out from the Edge Committee. Now, as you saw from the timetable before we started this, the plan now was to immediately go over to Richard and Suze for their facilitation of the discussion part of this panel. However, I do see that we have Cal back with us now, which is really wonderful. And Cal, as I said in the chat just there, if you're still able to pick this up anyway, Richard did cover a little bit of what you were going to say, I know, when you weren't with us. But if you would like to say a few words now, I'm sure we can squeeze you in, and then Richard and Suze can pick up following that. There's Cal, would you like to say something?
I would, but I'm not absolutely sure what Richard might have expressed, and rather than repeating his wonderful overview of what Walking the Land was, I think probably about the only thing I can add to his inevitably very broad perspective of things would be to say that the whole process of making the assemblage has been one that has brought together artists from such a wide range, and I'm enthralled by everybody's perseverance in actually producing such a good body of work. And I think that's probably about enough from me, because we're probably running behind time. So over now then to you, Iain, and to Richard and Suze.
Thank you very much, Cal. Actually, remarkably, we're not running behind time. We're actually, I think, 2 minutes ahead, which for those of you who know me will know that's quite some achievement. But I am not going to blether to fill the time. I'm going to immediately hand over to our two lead panelists, Richard Keating and Suze Adams. But before I do, I will introduce them because it seems only right and proper to do so. So Suze is a visual artist working in a range of media, but primarily photography, text, film, and installation. Her interests lie in how we perceive the world, and her works explore the relationship between body and place, the physical and psychological resonances of experience, intimations of the seen and the sensed, with a D on the end. Her artwork treads a soft path between documentation and poetry, between presence and absence. Suze's PhD involved an extensive visual and theoretical examination of her family history on the Hebridean island of Mull. And Suze first started collaborating with Walking the Land when she joined one of their first Friday walks in about 2006. So that's Suze, and then we'll pass you over, or then I will now introduce Richard Keating. And Richard is one of the three co-founders of Walking the Land. And the group dates from 2004, along with Cal Portman and Tom Keating. And Richard's work or perspective has been informed by many years of coordinating national and local environmental initiatives, but also by being a lead artist with Walking the Land. Richard gained a practice-led PhD at the University of Wales, Trinity St David, and this PhD researched arts practice as a constructive intervention within the context of landscape change and community action. Richard's current practice involves creating new cultural frameworks for engaging people with carbon neutral landscape change and especially tree planting. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Richard and Suze to lead us into the rest of today's session, which is a panel discussion. Richard and Suze.
Thanks very much, Ian, and good to see you, Cal. I'm just going to read a short quote which appears at the beginning of the assemblage by German artist Hermann Priggen. He died at sort of 2008, I think, but he's a landscape artist, and a lot of what he did was very relevant to what we've been talking about. The quote comes from this book, actually, Environmental Aesthetics, and interestingly enough, it itself is an assemblage of the work of many scientists and artists, so very much in line with the themes running through this whole conference. So he says, where my skin stretches begins the universe and the world. All that and we together and more are a steady river of exchange and metamorphosis. So echoing Priggen, we understand watermarks as both a metaphor about boundaries between practitioners and as a physical changing presence at the water's edge, with its own agency, history and future interrelated to our own. With the focus on the together and more, we set out to research the multisensual and multitemporal nature of the water's edge through multidisciplinary dialogue and response. Watermarks makes and performs work that reflects these edgy and liminal zones. And what has emerged and continues to emerge is a dialogical, relational and shared set of responses as we separately, in the time of COVID, walked our water's edges. With climate crisis, absence and loss, the visible and invisible, ethics and aesthetics guiding our footsteps. Having assembled our responses in the Watermarks collective video, we now invite your responses to the assemblage using the framework which Suze will now talk you through. Over to you, Suze.
Thank you. We're interested in how the assemblage might relate to your own experience of the edginess and liminality of the water's edge and being with others apart, as we still are in the time of COVID. If we see our aesthetic product as Priggen's quoting river of exchange and metamorphosis, I wonder, can similar aesthetic initiatives have a relevance to how we live in and understand our place within the world today? And as a group, as the assemblage went together, we each contributed our responses to the coming together, both practically and visually. And in one of our last Tuesday cafes, we had a discussion around undercurrents. Undercurrents being understood and being used as a metaphor for the themes that we could see running through, across, within the assemblage as a whole. So these are the sort of prime 6 undercurrents that we identified, and we hope they'll provide additional focus for our discussion. So if you bear these in mind, alongside your own questions, of course, and your own experiences and understandings of this sort of water edge and liminality. So the first undercurrent identified by the group was the assemblage as a metaphor for living and thinking differently, being with each other and the elemental other. The second undercurrent, binaries, the space between. The third undercurrent, constraints of the digital and the primal materiality, bodily immersion in nature. The fourth undercurrent, the personal and the political. The fifth, the assemblage reflecting a building of trust, community, connectivity, collectivity across the group, and somewhat might have been thought unlike alliances. And the sixth and final undercurrent, the inherent contradictions within the one to the many, the solid to fluid, tangible to digital, linear to experiential. But more than anything, we consider the assemblage as, and remaining as, much more than the sum of its parts. So now, Richard and I would like to open to questions. If you'd like to pop any questions in the chat, I think that's how we're doing it, isn't it, Iain? And then we'll just pick them up.
We can certainly do it in the chat, Suze and Richard, no problem whatsoever. If people don't have access to chat for whatever reason, if you put your hand up, I'll be able to spot you and invite you to ask your question. You should all be able to unmute your mics without interference from me. So without further ado, let me put this to the floor of the people here assembled. Ho ho. Sorry, couldn't resist that one. Andy.
Okay, if I just ask a question through the old-fashioned version without going through the chat, which is to ask Richard and Suze and others, the process, the coming together, the meetings, which was remote, digital, collaborative, and rectangular as well. Do we see that actually the process by which we came to do this with these current constraints is reflected very much in the work and its nature? Would you like to reflect on that one, please?
Yeah, if I just very quickly kick off, I think it is, and I think it'd be very difficult for it to be any other way, and partly because, you know, we met on screen, we've shown the assemblage on screen, we did things together apart, we're now talking to a whole group of people who I don't know where they all are physically, but they're on this screen again. So that's my very sort of fast, quick answer to it. Suze?
I would totally ditto what you said. The whole assemblage spanning so many different water's edges, so many different watermarks, reflecting different places, different sensibilities, but also a shared endeavour, and that has throughout felt so important, especially in a time of estrangement. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Can I ask Iain if other contributors would like to address Andy's question?
Yes, absolutely. I see Tamsin has her hand up. Tamsin, I don't know whether you're responding to Andy's question or want to spin off into another one, but yes, this is very much an open forum. I see that we have a large number of the artists assembled here today, so that is terrific if they want to join in with the conversation. So Tamsin, are you responding to Andy's point, or are you wanting to make a new one? Which way do you want to go here?
Yes, I was going to respond to Andy's point about but collecting together also that word liminal that Sue's talked about a couple of times, and realizing that I feel like I'm on the edge here. I'm on the edge of the screen. I'm looking into you. And I was thinking back to the photography session that happened earlier today. I don't know if anybody else was there. And one of the gentlemen was speaking about being on the threshold, taking photographs of people in doorways, and about being in, and that. So yes, it's interesting, this idea of looking at nature through the screen, through the threshold of the screen, being liminal as participants, both as artists and as participants in this session.
I think that's interesting, Tamsin, and that idea of the lens as a way of looking, as being a portal into other worlds and a way out of them. I wonder whether people like David, for example, whose work was much more about a canvas than a lens, whether you have a sort of similar take on it, David, if you're there to comment.
Yes, oddly enough, I think the square format of my pieces would be there if you were just seeing them in a room and not on a screen anyway. But the thing that did occur to me was that the sound with each piece, and mine as well, doesn't fit in that square box. It slides into your ears, which are anything but square. And it comes from places that are a multitude of shapes and sizes. So something about sound transcending these edges of boxes. So that was what I was thinking.
Can I comment on that, David? I was very intrigued because there was one time I listened to the whole assemblage silent because I was in a shared space and I wanted to look at it purely visually as well, just to experience it that way. And then when I obviously, usually would watch it with the sound, and like we did, fully just now. And I found it very interesting. And I wondered if in future you would consider using sound somehow alongside your paintings in a more installation format, or how you feel about that now.
I'm not sure, really. I'd have to think about that. When you say an installation format, actually presented in a room with sound against the alongside the pictures.
Yes, or with available, small sound device and headphones that people could put on if it was more a shared show of work and you didn't want to dominate with your sound. Either way, so that the paintings were viewed with the sound, so a different, so multi-sensory basically.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to explore it. I think I start out with the visual. I added the sound later. I actually went back to where I took the inspirations from for the pictures and went back there and recorded sound that went alongside them. That then did change the order of the pictures quite considerably, oddly enough. So I have to explore that. I haven't really got a definitive sense of whether I would do that or not.
Can I just make a comment on this conversation, which is that we've talked a lot about collaboration. We've had conversations about it at our last Tuesday cafes. But part of me really thinks that what we've done is cooperate. And I think what Susan and David have started to do is more of a collaboration. And in a way, we said in the introduction that this work continues. We haven't finished, and it's interesting that already we're talking more collaboratively perhaps than we did previously, when it felt very much as, despite our best efforts, Walking the Land were kind of setting out what we would be doing. What we've always wanted is to encourage these kind of conversations between others.
Thank you very much for that, Richard. Yes, Jeanette, I know you're wanting to come in. I'm just trying to take people in order. And Tamsin, was your hand? I see your hand is down now. So, have you posted your comment in the chat now? Your question to us all, or do you want to come back in, and then it's Jeanette and then Carolyn? So, okay, so people who can see the chat can respond to Tamsin in there. Jeanette, I think you were, as I've said already, you were second. So please carry on.
I was just. Can you hear me? Because I have no idea, because I can't see the chat at all. So sorry about this. I was just kind of interested, going back to this thing about the relationship between the sound and the paintings that we were just talking about. I wanted to know, because to me, I was listening to the sound quite carefully when we were looking at the paintings, and the sound has got quite an industrial feel, and I was wondering about whether that has influenced the paintings at all when you went down and were in that area and then decided to make the paintings. Is the place quite industrial? And I know it's very specific to your pieces of your paintings, but I was just kind of intrigued by that.
Yes, the answer is it's a semi-industrial area. It's all along the edge of the Grand Union Canal, and through various lock gates, hence control of the water and the edges of the water. So the sounds that I was listening to when I was taking the initial visit influenced what appeared on my paper in front of me at the time. And then that subsequently influenced the pictures that I produced. So yeah, the sound is interlinked, but the actual sound you heard came after the pictures.
Thanks.
I find that interesting, actually. Sorry if you don't mind me interjecting here, because your piece, Jeanette, and knowing your work more generally, is very close to the sea. So the difference between this, you know, the tidal, the sea, the massive surges, the whole, you know, backward thrust from, you know, the horizon far off. And then the very difference, David, I didn't realise, the controlled water. That is something that we perhaps haven't discussed before. That is something that's again coming out of this engagement together across water. So thank you both for, yes, that little exchange there.
Richard, I know you want to come in, but I'm keen to get the little yellow hand people in. And Carolyn, I think you were next, then Rachel, and then Richard, if that's okay.
Okay, I've just unmuted, obviously. No, I was particularly interested in the difference between the sort of digital and the virtual. And Catriona raised a question after I'd posted about that in the chat about our relationship. Did this project bring us together or not? And I think I almost feel like the opposite. It's kind of like the regular meetings we have online, like this, are much more interconnected as individuals. And so it's interesting to see that film come together. And on my computer, it's not the same on everybody's, I know, but it's a fairly new computer, but there was an awful lot of digital breakdown, and I thought that was quite interesting because now we're back in our boxes. That breakdown has gone and we're humans again. So there is that kind of weird sort of dissolving of reality, and, you know, having started with reality as our inspirations and then converted it into digital, and then it kind of just almost exploded in its own sort of pixelation, really. So I find it's really great to be back talking to human beings again and discussing it. Did everybody else get that in their screens? I don't know whether you did. Mine was really badly digitized, and it's, you know, it's a fairly new iMac and it shouldn't be. So I hope people didn't get it as badly as I did. But it did make me think a lot about that whole relationship between the first experience, the secondary experience, and what we've just had is a third experience, really. There's an observation rather than a question.
So thank you for that. Sorry, I was croaking there. I believe Richard, sorry, not Richard, Rachel, you were second, and then if Richard, if you still want to come in after Rachel, and then I'll go to the chat as well.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm slightly backtracking again because it was Susie's comment about David's paintings and the interaction of the sound that just and also what you were saying, Ian, about Jeanette's film and the sounds there, and I was just it set off a whole thing for me about the interaction of sound and image, and how the one can change your view of the other. When I was making mine, which didn't in the end have any sound on it, I had my kids with me, and so the sound, had I had it on the film, I think I've said this to a couple of people at the last Tuesday cafes, would have been my younger daughter going, Mum, have you finished yet? And it would have made the piece into something entirely different. It would have been more about being an artist parent than anything else, which might have been quite interesting in itself, but it's just, and then I couldn't reimpose any sound over the top because it wouldn't have sort of matched, and that mismatch might itself have been interesting. But again, it's just a sort of an interesting train of thought that's been sparked off by the whole process, and thank you for that. And I had actually thought of doing what Suze had said to David, and with our last Walking the Land project, which was at a butterfly conservation reserve called Rough Bank down here in Gloucestershire, and recording the sounds to go with the paintings. And I'd sort of forgotten about it, and now it's come back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Rachel. And that chimes very nicely with something that Gillian has popped into the comments, in which she says, and forgive me for reading it out, Gillian, but just to make sure that everybody picks up on it. I found I didn't want to have sound on my work, a drawing to be viewed primarily as a visual, not oral work. Strangely, mine felt much longer than 2 minutes without sound. To me, felt more intense, and she leaves that with a question mark. So that is perhaps something for people to ponder and follow up on. Richard, I know I've been pushing you to back, but now is your chance to come to the fore and pick up on comments. And after Richard, then it's Ruth, I believe.
Thanks, Ian. I just wanted to pick up on Catriona, what you've written, and I know Carolyn's also mentioned it. I'm really interested in this whole area of, you know, this conflict really between digital and what I would still call real. I know a lot of people wouldn't. And it's something that I'm really conflicted over. And I don't understand really how in the future that relationship between ourselves and cultural organisations, systems, which themselves are becoming more and more digitized, more and more virtual. How do we balance that up with our immersive feelings, our feelings of being in place? And it's a huge, huge question. And as AI continues to dominate, and we all live in Facebook world or Google world or wherever it is, what does that do to us? And that kind of chimed a bit with some of the talks earlier today, that whole idea of being in between. And to me, I just feel constantly stretched by being in between those sort of systems, technology I feel I need to try and keep up with. I'm not especially good at it, as lots of you will know. And on the other hand, the sort of more, I suppose, natural side of who I am, the agency of waters, for example, as we've been talking about, how do we keep that world alive?
Lots of thoughts provoked by that one, I'm sure, Richard. And I can see Suze. Rachel, I think your hand is still up. So if it's fantastic, thank you. Carolyn, I know, yes, I can see everybody's hand. I'm trying to juggle everybody, and I promise Ruth next. So Ruth, your shot next. And if folks want to come back to conversations that we've moved on from, that's absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever. We can manage that. I'm also keeping an eye on the chat, and I'll pick up a couple of thoughts from there when I get an opportunity. So Ruth.
Yeah, it's partly kind of, I'm just thinking how some of the thoughts I had before when we were discussing it, and then today, as a result of that's in a way added new areas which I haven't quite worked out in my head yet, but talking about the sound as well, and where it suddenly kind of struck me how much some of you are very, very close to the sea and the sounds of water, and some of us, we have to kind of make more of an effort to go there. It's a bit kind of locationally further away. And that whole, at the beginning, I think, Suze, you mentioned about that intangible, the fluid nature of the internet, how we're engaging, and that everything kind of the real and the intangible, and how that's overlapping in lots of ways through water and the work we've made and the way we're interacting. And I think that kind of element, I felt very much I had to almost bring the sounds back with me. So I don't live by the sea. I have to go to water. I can't hear it. So it's from years of memories of actually collecting kind of little tangible bits that I can bring home, but also traveling in my imagination. And that's kind of been a feature. And I'm sure that the whole way we're engaging online as well is feeding in, that there are lots of layers in the way that's interacting. So it's something that came out, just struck me today, talking about the sound as well. And that's, it's all kind of muddled up, this real and unreal, and
Thanks very much, Ruth, and that indeed chimes with the comment that Lina has made in the comment box there. You know, saying the sound for her film was, and I quote, an unwitting happening, which I think is a lovely quotation, and reminds me very much of a lot of work. Indeed, the talk from Mike Pearson earlier today touched on it as well. A lot of work in the kind of the quotidian and the everyday experiences. But I'm not going to go down that route at the moment. I'm going to hand smoothly over to Carolyn, who I think is next on the yellow hand of responsibility.
Thank you. I was just scribbling some more notes. Oh God, I'm responding to lots of people's things now. And I think really going back to what Richard was talking about, I kind of don't have a dilemma with whether it's, you know, the virtual takes away from the real. I think they're very different things. And I think the digital is just a tool, just as well as a camera lens is, or a pencil and a piece of paper. And it's kind of how we want to relate to them that matters. And I think sometimes we spend too much time worrying about one thing taking over the other or whatever. It's a free choice, just as it is to pick up the pencil, I guess. But I think I take on board as well, though, that it's about when it comes to where we inhabit, you know, when we go for a walk, we're free from all of that. When we inhabit Zoom, we are kind of living in a virtual world which has lost all sense of touch and tactility. And yet I can't help saying, when I watched Cal's film and the way that he drew these wonderful parallels with the fact that the sea is marking, you know, it's making drawings, you were using really visual drawing languages there. And I just thought, well, I wouldn't have seen that if it wasn't on my digital screen. That's how I access it. So I guess it's going back to that thing about portals and doorways. That's it, really.
Fascinating. Portals and doorways are the theme of the day so far, aren't they, really? But can you have a portal or a doorway in a watery landscape? Actually, Richard, I thought your contribution did give us a portal and a doorway disguised as a fountain, but nevertheless we had a portal and a doorway there. So perhaps we do have. Suze, I think you were next, and then we've got a whole plethora of yellow hands, but I'll come to you all in sequence.
Yes, just a couple of things really. initially I was thinking from what Rachel was saying about how if she'd been recording sound, she'd have her children there, her family, her other one of her other identities included. And I think that's very interesting in what we edit in or edit out. And that is, of course, a creative choice. And it's always been the thing with photography, you know, is it real or is it manipulated? You know, what that editing, and it's a personal choice. It's very subjective. And what Carolyn was saying about the digital, the multi-sensory, and any sort of divide there, and then moving on to thresholds. And I think, again, the whole thing about thresholds is fascinating, you know, the whole Easter Island thing. But I think something that's really important to remember, that a threshold isn't always entry into, it's a two-way thing. It's like the two heads of Janus, you know, which way are you looking? So I just wanted to put that forward, just a comment, really. So thank you.
And thank you very much, Suze. Andy, I think you were next.
Hi, sorry about that. I would like to pay tribute to, as has been said, a lot of the people who participated weren't filmmakers or video makers. There's been something quite extraordinary about people stepping outside of their comfort zone. Maybe that's a kind of redolent of the time when we're all kind of doing things which are new to us. A number of people willingly kind of committed to something which was quite alien. So the kind of the whole of the video format, which is inevitably digital and rectilinear, I mean, and moving, and so kind of a large number of the pieces, of course, are actually a series of stills, which is interesting of the time. So it's that kind of frontier between, as in David's, which is to say, it could be like walking around a kind of gallery. We're on some sort of, you know, frontiers of different exhibition formats, which I think is quite exciting, quite interesting, but very much it kind of say forced on us. We were kind of grasping what we could do in these most peculiar times. So I would just say there's a lot of compromises taken place here, which has been in many cases productive, and also improvisation. So it's been a kind of, I think, an inevitable and in many cases positive outcome of things which are, you know, no one chose to do it like this. It was kind of thrust upon us, and yet what's emerged has been something that's, you know, we wouldn't have designed it like this had it not been for the strange circumstances in which we found ourselves. But I would say I'd really like to pay tribute to all those people who kind of willingly went along with it in a world which is not something they're familiar with. And so that was an observation, and thank you everyone for being such good participants.
That's a really nice observation, Andy. Thank you, you know, on behalf of everybody else, but you too as well. You know, we need to acknowledge your central role in this. In terms of what you've just said, I was wondering, but actually I was wondering if the environment we were, or you were all operating in, this rather watery landscape, this kind of almost liminal space, contributed to the flexibility and freedom to experiment people found themselves in. So just as much as the environment of the restraining times, perhaps it was the physical space as well. But anyway, Kel, you're up next, and off you go.
Okay, yes, I think one thing that we need not forget is that we make work to share, but we make work primarily for ourselves. We're out there in the environment, we're experiencing it directly. So the question comes down, how do you actually relate? How do you give an equivalent of your experience in that wider space? If it's digital, does it matter? If it's pens on paper, does that matter? You know, how much is the medium becoming the message? That's a question.
Now, that's a good question to roll into the last 10 minutes of the talk, is it not? I would imagine. Yes, I thought Carolyn might be first off the block there. Carolyn, over to you. I think you're muted, Carolyn, unfortunately.
Sorry. Yes, it is very interesting for me, particularly because that I use the Google Earth animation, which is actually has to show the logo. And I at one point was thinking, oh, can I get away with stripping it out? I thought, well, it's actually really important because it is part of the visual language of the whole thing, because it is actually raising a discussion that we all look at maps on Google Earth and use Google Maps. We're so familiar with looking at things like that, and we see drone imagery all the time that it was a comparison between that and the idea of actually being on the ground. So it was a dilemma for me at the time, but so that Google logo is actually about that language issue. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And Richard?
I was going to say something, but I'll say something else as well, which is I was very, very taken by the logo, Carolyn, when I first watched all the various clips. And I had a very similar sort of internal conversation to the one you've just expressed, and may have shared it with other people in the room. And that does kind of lead me back into the first thing which I was saying, which I've got no problem with using digital technology. It's just that there is still a tension for me in doing that. It means I'm not out in the woods or walking. It means I'm not breathing in fresh air. But I suppose more worryingly is, we just kind of could have made the same arguments about driving a car to get to sites, which, most of us still do. And there is a environmental impact on all of that. And I think what I'm saying is that I feel there's a need just to somehow broker, maybe be the portal for those different worldviews, because I think a lot of people, whether it's just because they spend hours in their bedrooms on their tablets or watching TV, aren't aware of the kind of world that most of our video clips that we've just been watching are so aware of, and just full of that kind of real, as I say, I know it's not a very helpful word, but real life.
Thanks very much, Richard. I noticed that Carolyn and Kel, you still have hands up. Are they kind of accidental hands, legacy,
Definitely,
or whatever you want to call them? I'm not sure what they are, but we do have a new hand. So Tamsin, over to you.
We're called Walking the Land, our group. So I was just interested to hear from some of the others how important walking was to making your part of that assemblage.
I would say totally and absolutely. There's absolutely no way I could make work if it wasn't for walking. So, as Hamish Fulton says, just no walk, no work.
And Suze, and then Richard and Jeanette, I know you might have a separate point, so I'll come to you in a second, if that's okay. Suze, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Just to say that in this particular instance, my contribution was actually made due to very little walking, because I had an accident at the beginning of September, so was unable to walk all the distance I could. So I was constrained by the material I already had. But walking, is for me very much, it's that one step after the other. It's the pace, it's the rhythm, it's the different views. It's all of that which open up my awareness and all the senses. So yes, walking, very important. And what drew me to Richard and Kel and Tom and now the wonderfully expanded group in the first place. Thank you.
True.
And Richard?
Yeah, just very quickly, I raised a question to, is it Colin who was speaking earlier?
Yeah.
About walking as a portal, really. And, you know, and he was talking about different realms. And certainly for me, walking is the process which just opens up the world and enables me to find, in Colin's terms, the mythology in the world.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm keeping an eye on time, so we're getting very close to the break now. But Jeanette, I've kept you back, so now is your chance.
Okay, can you hear me? I haven't. Okay.
Yes,
great.
yes, we can hear you. Yep.
Walking is very much integral to what I do. I mean, I have to go out there and I have to walk, and I have to actually I even have to go on the sea. So it's not just walking; it's actually going out in boats and traveling across the surface of the sea. But walking is where I go out and you have to experience the whole atmosphere, the environment, which kind of envelops me, I think. I mean, I got involved in this group during lockdown because I can't even remember how I found it, but because of lockdown, and I was stuck down in Somerset. It sounds bad, but it wasn't. I started making work as a result of getting involved in walking. But I also thinking about this sound thing again, and you know the pieces that I make. I am not a filmmaker, but I've kind of got involved in it because it intrigues me. And it also allows me to put sound into with moving images. But what I then suddenly realized, and somebody said this to me, they said, but there is sound in your paintings. And I think that there is a relationship between what I do in the studio and my paintings and the movement and the sound that I try to generate just within an image on a canvas, and then also the film, going out and filming and recording sound. So I've suddenly realized that there is quite a strong relationship between the two things that I'm involved in.
Jeanette, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm starting to move a little anxiously because I've just had a note pop up that